Imagine, if you will, a nation that is just defined by some of the most profound and honestly head-scratching paradoxes on the modern geopolitical map.
Yeah, it really is a unique case study.
It is. I mean, we are talking about a country that pulls in over $1 billion in mining revenue,
Hmm.
right? But then the per capita GDP for its actual citizens sits at a mere, like, $640.
Which is an incredibly stark contrast.
Totally. And picture this. It's a place that hasn't held a single national election. Not one. And they haven't implemented their own constitution since 1993.
Right, which is just decades at this point.
Exactly. And, there's this mandatory national service program. It was originally billed to the youth as this 18-month commitment. But it can just seamlessly and quietly stretch into a literal lifetime of conscription.
And that's the reality for so many people there.
Yeah. But here is the crazy part. Despite all of this immense internal pressure, all these contradictions, the state doesn't collapse.
No, it doesn't.
It survives, it functions, it somehow holds together. And that is exactly what we are getting into today on this deep dive.
Because, when analyzing states that seem to just defy conventional political gravity, observers almost always look for simple explanations.
Right, like they just assume it's all about brute force.
Exactly. They lean heavily on brute force. But the thing is, brute force alone is incredibly expensive. It's exhausting to maintain over decades.
Oh, for sure, it drains resources fast.
So what we usually find in these enduring paradoxical states is a deeply complex, kind of hidden architecture keeping the walls up.
A hidden architecture, I like that phrasing.
Yeah, it's an architecture built on a fusion of raw survival, ancient tradition, and deeply militarized psychology.
And uncovering that exact architecture is our mission today. For this deep dive, we are looking at a brilliantly detailed presentation. It's titled Eritrea Through the Lens of Spiral Dynamics.
It's a fantastic analytical piece.
It really is. Our goal today is to unpack how those elements you just mentioned, the raw survival, clan traditions, military discipline, and that drive for economic wealth, how they don't just clash, they actually coexist.
Right. They lock together into one single state apparatus.
And before we get too far in, I just want to set the stage for you, the listener, because when exploring a politically charged environment like this, it is, well, it's very easy to fall into ideological debates.
It's incredibly easy.
But our mission today is strictly structural. We are looking at a presentation that takes UN findings, Human Rights Watch reports, macroeconomic data, and maps them onto this specific analytical framework.
Yes, and we should be very clear about our position here.
Absolutely. We aren't here to endorse any political viewpoint, left-wing or right-wing. We aren't taking a stance on the geopolitical stage. We are just impartially reporting the data and the structural logic exactly as this presentation lays it out.
Exactly. The framework just provides a purely diagnostic lens. We're reading the map exactly as the data drew it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We should probably start with the visual language of the framework itself.
That's a good place to start, yeah.
So slide 1 shows an illustration. It's a series of concentric colored circles. It looks almost like a bullseye.
Right, radiating outward.
Yeah, starting from the very center, there's a beige circle. And then as you move outward, the rings expand into purple, then red, blue, orange, green, yellow, and finally on the very outer edge, turquoise.
And those colors, they are the absolute key to decoding everything we're going to discuss today.
Okay, so what do they actually mean?
So in spiral dynamics, which is the tool this presentation uses, each of those colors represents a distinct psychological and social operating system. They call them VME.
VMEs, got it.
Right. Think of them as different lenses through which human beings view the world, solve problems, organize their communities, and basically build governments.
So it's like a mental framework for a whole society.
Exactly. And the theory dictates that as life conditions change, like, say, a society faces new environmental threats or discovers resources or goes through a war, new colors or new operating systems emerge to handle that specific complexity.
Oh, I see. So it's essentially a system of adaptation.
Yes, pure adaptation.
If a new problem pops up that the old operating system can't solve, the society has to develop a new lens just to survive.
You nailed it. And we're going to use this color-coded bullseye to figure out how Eritrea processes its own set of massive challenges.
But the source material is very careful about how we should interpret this,
Very
right?
careful, yes.
Because slide 2 shows an illustration, and it's this beautifully drawn, almost fantasy-style topographic map. It features distinctly colored terrains.
Right, representing the different levels.
Yeah, there's a beige desert in one corner, a purple rocky expanse, a fiery red volcano, a deep blue sea, and so on. And right beside this map is a spiral diagram that connects those 8 colors we just talked about to specific concepts.
And the visual of that topographic map is absolutely vital. It establishes a core rule of the framework. We're looking at a landscape, not a ladder.
A landscape, not a ladder. Meaning what, exactly?
Well, the most critical text on this slide literally reads, value systems, not rankings. No single level or color is inherently superior to the one before it.
Okay, so it's not like green is morally better than beige.
Exactly. Each one is just a perfectly rational adaptation to a specific set of life conditions. I mean, you don't use a boat to cross a desert, right?
Right.
And you don't use a camel to cross an ocean. If you were dealing with a famine, the operating system of a highly complex pluralistic democracy might actually be entirely useless to you.
Because you can't eat a vote.
Exactly. You need an operating system dedicated strictly to finding water.
That makes perfect sense on a theoretical level. But, looking at this spiral, I can't help but think of it like a video game skill tree.
A skill tree? How do you mean?
Well, do you have to, unlock the previous level or establish that foundational terrain before you can safely advance to the next one? Like, can you just jump from the beige desert straight to the blue sea?
Ah, I see. Well, the framework strongly suggests that skipping levels creates immense instability.
So you do have to build a foundation.
Yes. You cannot sustainably build a complex pluralistic society, which would be the green or yellow levels, if your basic survival, the beige level, is constantly under threat.
Right, because everyone's just panicking about basic needs.
Exactly. A society needs to know it will eat tomorrow before it can effectively organize a Supreme Court. And the slide explicitly states a red-blue framework blocks transitions.
Okay, so that indicates progress through these terrains in Eritrea is artificially halted.
Yes, and unraveling why that blockage exists and who benefits from it is going to be the central mystery of our analysis today.
Which brings us crashing down into the reality of that foundation, because you really can't understand the politics of a nation without understanding the literal dirt it stands on.
No, you can't. Environmental reality dictates everything.
So slide 3 shows an illustration. It's a barren, deeply cracked agricultural field. It just stretches all the way to the horizon. And hanging above this massive expanse of dry, fractured earth is a single tiny cloud.
It's a very striking visual.
It immediately grounds the conversation in physical reality.
It does, because
Yeah.
the brutal baseline conditions of Eritrea's spiral begin right here. This slide outlines 3 foundational realities that dictate the country's trajectory.
Let's go through them. What's the first one?
First, farming operates with zero safety net. The data shows that 80% of the cultivated land is entirely rain-fed.
80%. Wow.
Yeah, and in an era of intense climate unpredictability, that means if the rains fail, all societal gains are completely reset. Drought is a constant existential threat.
It's just hanging over them constantly.
Exactly. Second, the governance structure is entirely centralized. President Isaias Afwerki has been in power since 1993.
That's over 30 years.
Right. And the national constitution drafted in 1997 was shelved. No national elections have been held, and both independent media and an independent legislature are completely blocked.
Which leads to the third reality presented here, which is just this profound economic trap. The slide notes that 69% of the population lives below the poverty line.
Which is staggering.
It is.
Yeah.
That $640 GDP per capita we mentioned in the intro, that places Eritrea 176th out of 191 on the Human Development Index.
When you look at that cracked earth in the illustration, the psychological reality of that statistic hits you.
Oh, completely. You simply cannot sit around philosophizing about higher-order political theories or free market enterprise or civil rights when you are staring at a dry field just praying for that one tiny cloud to break.
Your entire cognitive load is dedicated to securing calories.
Right. That physiological environmental reality forces the societal operating system down into the very first color of the spiral. It anchors the state in raw survival.
And when the baseline is this harsh, every subsequent system built on top of it will carry the anxiety of that potential starvation.
So the question then becomes, how do all these different operating systems interact when that baseline anxiety is so intense?
Right, because they don't exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. And slide 4 shows an illustration that captures this. It's a thick, braided rope. And this rope is made of 8 brightly colored strands, matching the colors of the spiral dynamics framework.
Okay, so all the VMEs are woven together.
Right. But right in the middle, this beautiful multicolored rope is being violently squeezed by a heavy, dark metal vise. or like a structural ceiling.
Ouch.
Yeah, and next to it, there's a diagram of concentric rings with arrows trying to move outward, but they just keep bouncing off a thick red and blue barrier.
What's fascinating here is the concept of coexistence under extreme pressure. Spiral dynamics tells us that all 8 levels, all these VMEs, coexist within a nation simultaneously.
Even in a place as restricted as this.
Yes. In Eritrea, you have a nomadic herder, an army conscript, an urban engineer working in a mine, and a diaspora activist living in Europe.
Okay, I see.
They are all activating completely different levels of this spiral to navigate their daily lives. But that heavy metal vise squeezing the rope represents the structural reality of the state itself.
So the state apparatus is actively compressing the natural development of its citizens. And the presentation labels this the red-blue ceiling.
The red-blue structural ceiling.
Break that down for me. What does that mean in this framework?
Well, in this specific framework, red supplies raw coercion, centralized power, force.
All right, that's the muscle.
Right. And blue supplies the ideology, the strict rules, and the sense of national duty. When those two combine, they form an iron barrier that locks the upper levels out.
So the natural societal energy tries to move up the spiral, like maybe moving toward orange free market achievement or green community pluralism, and it just bounces off that red-blue vise.
Exactly. The state views any upward progression beyond its direct control as a fundamental threat to its existence.
Man, so let's look at exactly what is being squeezed beneath that vise, starting at the absolute bottom. Slide 5 shows an illustration. It's a lone person crouched very low to the ground.
It's a very bleak image.
It is. They are desperately trying to scoop water from a tiny, shrinking puddle in a vast, cracked, dried-out landscape. And there are a few parched sorghum stalks standing nearby.
This is BEIGE. The BEIGE VME is the level of pure instinctual survival.
The presentation actually titles this slide, Drought Dictates Survival.
And the structural evidence provided by the source is stark. According to the UN World Food Program, 60% of the population is food insecure.
Because, as we saw in the baseline slide, 80% of that cultivated land has no irrigation. It relies entirely on the sky.
Right. When your next meal is not guaranteed, survival constraints dictate absolutely everything else about your behavior. Everything. The slide illustrates this beautifully by showing how the higher values, such as purple kinship, red power, blue duty, and orange achievement, they literally become subservient tools to the beige drive.
Wait, how does that work? How does achievement become subservient to survival?
Well, you don't seek achievement for personal fulfillment or self-actualization, right? You seek it strictly to buy brain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
You don't rely on your clan for deep cultural enrichment. You relied on them because if you don't pool your resources, you will starve.
So beige pulls the gravitational weight of the entire society downward.
Yes. It strips away the luxury of higher-order thinking.
Which naturally leads us to how individuals actually manage to survive that intense beige environment. I mean, you can't survive a drought completely alone.
No, human beings aren't built for that.
Right. And slide 6 shows an illustration that explains this. It's a massive ancient tree. It has a deep, complex, tangled root system stretching incredibly far into the dry earth.
Representing the network.
Exactly. But right beside this massive, powerful tree, there is a tiny, fragile sapling struggling to grow in its shadow.
And this brings us to purple. In spiral dynamics, purple is the level of kinship. It is the tribe, the clan, the magical and mystical bonds that tie a group of people together.
To protect them from that harsh beige environment.
Exactly. Those deep roots represent the profound Eritrean clan network.
But the slide explicitly states, kinship shields, but confines. It presents the purple level as a double-edged sword.
It really is. In a resource-scarce environment, the individual represented by that tiny sapling cannot survive alone. They must be tied into a rigid, protective web.
What does that web look like in practice?
It includes parents, village assemblies, and crucially, diaspora kin who send vital remittances from abroad. But this protection comes at a significant cost to personal autonomy.
Right, because the group comes first.
Always. Clan elders enforce rigid conformity. They hold immense veto power over the major decisions of an individual's life, including who you marry, where you work, and whether you are allowed to migrate.
You know, I want to push back on the negative framing of that conformity for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
If that clan network is literally the only thing keeping you alive when the rains fail, isn't conformity a completely fair price to pay? From a purely logical standpoint, if the group survives, you survive. The loss of autonomy almost seems like a necessary insurance premium.
That's a very astute point. From an evolutionary standpoint, it is highly adaptive. The Purple operating system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, ensure the continuation of the group in hostile conditions.
Right. It works.
It does work. However, the slide draws a grim conclusion at the bottom regarding modern development. It says the protective web becomes a cage.
A cage.
Yeah.
Because you can't leave.
Exactly. If an individual decides they want to activate a higher level, say, they want to challenge an elder's decision or pursue an unapproved path, they risk exile from the network.
And in a BEIGE survival environment, exile doesn't just mean you lose your social circle.
No, it very likely means death. The threat of exile ensures the Purple level demands and receives absolute loyalty, which severely limits individual growth.
But Eritrea isn't just a collection of local clan elders making decisions in village assemblies, right? There is a massive modern state apparatus sitting on top of this kinship network.
A very heavy state apparatus.
Right. And that takes us to the next color on the spiral. Slide 7 shows an illustration. It's a rusty, weathered obelisk.
A monument to power.
Yeah, and it's bound by these massive, heady iron chains, and it's sitting totally isolated in a barren wasteland beneath a deeply menacing blood-red sky.
We have arrived at red.
The blood-red sky kind of gives it away.
It does. If purple is about the safety of the tribe and the suppression of the individual for the good of the group, red is the explosive emergence of the powerful ego.
Okay, so it's a rebellion against that purple conformity.
Exactly. It is the level of raw power, conquest, dominance, and rule by fear. The presentation titles this specific slide Red Level. Fear holds power.
And this is where the timeline of the modern Eritrean state really comes into focus in the source material. The slide tracks how a program that was originally supposed to be a standard 18-month national service commitment, initiated in 1995, escalated into a state of permanence following the devastating 1998 border war with Ethiopia.
Right. That war was a massive turning point.
And then, by 2001, key political dissidents known as the G15 were arrested, and the independent press was entirely banned.
Because the red operating system functions on singular, centralized control, it has absolutely zero tolerance for nuance, debate, or opposition.
It's just total dominance.
Yes. And the slide references comprehensive UN findings from 2016 detailing crimes against humanity, specifically pointing to this system of indefinite national service.
So how does red actually use that conscription?
The red VME utilizes this endless conscription for 3 distinct, highly calculated purposes. First, economic extraction through forced labor. Second, political control by keeping the population constantly monitored and restricted in their movements.
Because if everyone is in the army, everyone is accounted for.
Precisely. And third, military readiness by keeping the entire society on a permanent, unending war footing.
I think about the sheer logistical weight of that. To maintain that level of constant vigilance, to keep the chains tight on that obelisk.
Yeah.
It requires an incredible amount of energy from the state.
It is entirely exhausting. Pure red just ruling by brute physical force and the constant threat of violence is unsustainable over the long term.
Right, because people eventually push back or you just run out of money to pay the guards.
Exactly. A state cannot sustain itself on fear alone forever. The resources required to police a terrified population eventually drain the system. To achieve true stability, the leadership eventually needs the population to want to obey.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because brute force needs a story.
It needs a narrative, yes.
It needs a moral justification to make the chains feel less like chains and more like a badge of honor. And slide 8 shows an illustration that captures this shift perfectly.
What's the visual here?
It's a heavy, sacred stone monument. Deeply engraved into the stone are the words duty and sacrifice. And surrounding this central monument are ranks and ranks of uniform, identical, featureless stone figures, all standing in rigid, perfect attention.
And this introduces the blue VME.
So how does blue differ from red?
Blue emerges from the chaos and exhaustion of red to establish order, purpose, and higher meaning. It introduces the concepts of absolute right and absolute wrong.
The title here is Blue Duty Becomes Permanent.
Right. And the slide explains a brilliant, albeit tragic, psychological loop utilized by the state. It says, obedience stems from guilt, not guns.
Guilt. That is so much more insidious and honestly so much more powerful than a physical weapon.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you control the guilt, you control the person entirely. They police themselves.
That's exactly it. You have to remember, Eritrea fought a 30-year brutal war for independence.
30 years. Generations.
Generational trauma. The blue ideology takes the very real trauma of that multi-generational sacrifice and builds a rigid, unassailable doctrine around it. Citizens are taught from a very young age that they owe an eternal, unpayable debt to the fallen martyrs who secured the country's freedom.
So when that 18-month national service gets extended to 10 years or 20 years or just indefinitely, it's no longer framed as a government mandate that you can protest.
No, it's framed as a sacred obligation.
The slide actually points out that questioning the system is coded not just as illegal, but as a moral betrayal of the fallen.
And that is the ultimate genius of the blue operating system. It completely dissolves the individual self into a sacred national duty.
You're just a tiny piece of the greater mission.
Right. You aren't suffering in a trench or a mine because a dictator wills it. You are sacrificing because the nation and its revered martyrs demand it. The rhetoric is validated as absolute truth. The moral obligation is deeply internalized by the citizen, and compliance is achieved without needing a soldier on every single street corner.
Because, like you said, the mind effectively polices itself out of reverence and guilt.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have red supplying the physical guns, the surveillance, and the fear. And we have blue supplying the crushing guilt and the sacred duty.
The muscle and mind.
Right. So what happens when those two operating systems actually lock together?
That is where the architecture really solidifies.
Because slide 9 shows an illustration of this exact process. It's a blacksmith's heavy black anvil. A glowing, red-hot piece of metal is being violently forged and struck by a hammer, and bright sparks are just flying everywhere.
And this is the synthesis that creates the structural anomaly of the state, the red-blue fusion.
The presentation refers to it as a forged architecture.
Think about the sheer unyielding nature of combining the absolute violent power of red with the absolute moral certainty of blue.
It's terrifying.
It is. The Venn diagram on this slide maps the intersection perfectly. On one side, red brings military coercion, a vast patronage network, and the constant fear of arbitrary detention.
And on the other side,
blue brings national duty rhetoric, the martyrdom narrative, and a doctrine that demands permanent mobilization.
And the overlap in that Venn diagram is labeled the militarized state.
Yes.
It's characterized by indefinite national service, an environment where there is no legal exit from the system, and a societal view where every single citizen is seen primarily as a soldier first and a human being second.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this forged architecture is the exact mechanism that creates the impenetrable ceiling we saw back on slide 4.
Right, the vice squeezing the rope.
Exactly. Fear compels the citizen to obey, and doctrine sanctifies that fear, making it holy.
So what happens if someone tries to push past that? Like if an individual or a group tries to introduce orange market economics or green civil rights or yellow systemic transparency?
They're immediately identified as threats, but not just political threats. They are seen as threats to both the physical power structure of red and the sacred moral fabric of blue.
So they aren't just dissidents, they are heretics.
Exactly. The upper levels of human societal development are entirely blocked by this anvil.
Wow. This synthesis completely explains the massive paradox we started this deep dive with.
It really does.
Because we mentioned a billion-dollar mining industry in the introduction. That sounds like economic progress, right? That sounds like the orange level of achievement and enterprise.
It does sound like orange on paper.
But slide 10 shows an illustration that reveals the truth. It's a heavily fortified, weathered concrete gateway. It's locked tight with a thick padlock.
A gateway keeping something in.
Yeah, behind the concrete wall, there's a guard tower and a mining cart filled with ore. And there's a stark sign painted on the wall that reads, "No sunset since 1998.
Orange is the VME of achievement, logic, strategic enterprise, and individual success. It's the color of modern capitalism, scientific innovation, and meritocracy.
Okay, so the slide poses a critical question. If this orange sector exists, namely through massive lucrative mining operations like the BEIGE mine and the highly educated graduates coming out of state colleges, why doesn't the country as a whole prosper?
Right. Where does the $1 billion go?
And the presentation provides a flow chart that offers a pretty devastating answer. It says, orange output is conscripted.
Conscripted capital.
Exactly. The revenue from these international mines and the labor of the educated graduates do not flow into an open compounding market. They are fed directly back into the red-blue state apparatus.
So the mining money funds the vast security forces.
Yep. And the college graduates are immediately absorbed into the national service system, assigned to ministries or military roles with absolutely no autonomy.
There is, As the slide explicitly states, no compounding cycle.
What does that mean practically?
Well, in a healthy functioning spiral, the orange level creates independent wealth, which is then reinvested by individuals to create more wealth, eventually building infrastructure that lifts the entire society out of beige survival.
It builds a middle class.
Exactly. But here, the orange level is essentially a captive, enslaved engine. It generates immense power and wealth, but the red-blue state consumes absolutely all of it to maintain its own lock on the population.
So independent markets and true innovation are just starved of oxygen.
Because the state correctly views private wealth as a potential red rival to its own centralized power. If citizens become wealthy, they become independent, and independence shatters the blue narrative of shared sacrifice.
Ah, right. Because if some people are rich, then the sacrifice isn't shared anymore.
Exactly. It breaks the illusion.
So orange is completely captured by the state. What about green then? Because green is the level of community, equality, human rights, and pluralism. It is the exact opposite of red-blue rigidity.
Green is a massive threat to a closed system.
And slide 11 shows an illustration of how green survives. It's a glowing radio transmission tower perched on a rocky, dark coastline. It is broadcasting these bright orange signal waves out over the dark ocean, reaching toward a distant, scattered fleet of small glowing boats.
That visual is incredibly poignant.
It is. Green represents civil society. It is the operating system of independent voices, human rights organizations, a free press, and political opposition.
And the slide doesn't mince words regarding its status inside the country. All domestic channels for green have been severed since the crackdowns of 2001.
Right. The slide notes that 18 journalists have been held in detention since that specific year, effectively eradicating the independent press.
So if green is completely blocked within the borders of the country, where does that energy go? Because the drive for human rights doesn't just evaporate.
Right. People still care.
Look at the visual metaphor of the illustration. The presentation notes that the pluralist voice thrives in diaspora.
Ah, so that radio tower on the coast, broadcasting out to the distant boats, that represents the reality that the only place green can safely exist for Eritrea is offshore.
Exactly. It survives through UN shadow reports, through exhaustive testimony meticulously gathered by international human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch.
And through protests, journalism, and demonstrations held in European or American cities by the vast diaspora.
Right. The domestic ecosystem is entirely silenced, leaving the green VMEM in a state of permanent exile. It can speak about the country, but it cannot speak from within it.
And because green is exiled, you certainly cannot reach the level above it, which is yellow.
No, you can't skip levels.
Let's examine yellow, because this is where the systems thinking really peaks in the framework. Slide 12 shows an illustration. It's a stark, absolutely impenetrable concrete bunker, or like a cube.
Just a solid block.
Yeah, and it's sitting in a shallow pool of glowing yellow water or energy. This yellow energy is swirling all around the bunker, pushing against it, but it absolutely cannot penetrate those thick concrete walls.
Yellow is the level of systemic integration. It is a massive cognitive leap for a society.
How so?
Well, it is a realization that society is a complex, interconnected living system. A yellow operating system thrives on adaptive feedback loops, multi-stakeholder participation, and, crucially, transparent accountability.
So it wants to bring everything together.
Right. It wants to take all the previous colors, the survival of beige, the clan support of purple, the energy of red, the order of blue, the enterprise of orange, and the empathy of green, and integrate them into a healthy, functioning, flexible whole.
But the slide states flatly, yellow blocked by red-blue. I mean, it makes sense. You can't have adaptive feedback loops if the press is shut down and reporters are jailed.
Exactly.
And you can't have multi-stakeholder participation if there hasn't been a national election in 3 decades and the Constitution remains unimplemented.
Right. A systemic network requires all of its individual nodes to communicate freely. If you sever the information flow, the network collapses.
So the red-blue bunker, which again rules by a combination of fear and rigid duty, it just cannot tolerate the structural openness that yellow demands.
Transparency is fundamentally fatal to a system built on total control. If the state allows transparent accountability, the narrative of necessary sacrifice falls apart.
Right, because people see behind the curtain.
Exactly. So the yellow energy, the potential for systemic integration, merely swirls around the outside of the state apparatus, completely foreclosed from entering.
Man. This brings us to a really tragic visual regarding the highest level discussed in this specific framework, Slide 13 shows an illustration of a traditional wooden weaving loom.
And what's on the loom?
Well, the colorful threads woven on it, and they're threads that perfectly match the spiral dynamics colors we've been tracking, are snapped. They are frayed, broken, and just unraveling at the edges.
That's a powerful image of societal breakdown.
It gets worse. Tucked into the side of the loom is a small tag that simply reads, "No civil society since 2001."
The turquoise level in spiral dynamics is about deep global holism. It sees the profound interconnectedness of all life and relies fundamentally on incredibly high levels of societal trust.
Trust, that's the key word.
It is, and the slide explicitly claims holism stalls without trust.
It mentions the 1997 Constitution here, which honestly feels like a ghost haunting this entire presentation.
It really is a heartbreaking detail. The 1997 Constitution, which was ratified but never implemented, was essentially a brilliant turquoise design.
Wait, really? The Constitution itself mapped this?
Yes. It briefly sketched out a beautiful, multi-level ecology for Eritrea. It was a framework where all the colors could safely acknowledge each other.
Oh, wow.
The traditions of purple kinship, the dynamic energy of red leadership, the structural order of blue law, the enterprise of orange markets, they were all supposed to integrate into a holistic, trusting society.
But because of the systemic repression that followed the 1998 war, the institutional trust deficit created by the lack of an independent judiciary, the banning of the free press, and the crushing of political opposition, that fabric just completely unraveled.
The threads snapped?
You cannot have holism in a society where neighbors are terrified of speaking their minds.
No, you can't. Without trust, a society fractures down to its lowest levels. You cannot build a holistic turquoise society when citizens are actively encouraged by the state to report on one another to the security apparatus.
The psychological toll of that reality is just immense.
It's unfathomable for those of us on the outside.
So what does this all actually mean for the average person living inside the system right now? Like, how do you mentally process living in a state with this architecture?
It requires immense cognitive compartmentalization.
I bet. Slide 14 shows an illustration that maps this out. It's a rugged wall made of stone and mud. Embedded solidly into the mortar of this wall are 5 distinct, brightly colored square tiles. Beige, purple, red, blue, and orange.
Okay, the solid tiles.
Yeah, but above these solid tiles, the spaces where the green, yellow, and turquoise tiles should be are totally empty. They are merely faint chalk outlines drawn onto the stone.
This slide drives home a crucial, lived reality. Spiral dynamics is a mosaic, not a ladder. These levels aren't just abstract academic concepts. They are the daily operating systems of human beings.
They are happening right now.
Right now. According to World Bank and Human Rights Watch data, these 5 active levels, solid tiles, exist simultaneously within the exact same households.
Wait, so one family is dealing with all of this at once. Let's really unpack the weight of that.
Okay, picture it.
A single family, sitting around a dinner table, is actively juggling all of this cognitive dissonance. They're dealing with the beige reality of drought and the constant anxiety of food vulnerability.
That's survival.
Right. They are managing the purple obligations of clan conformity, ensuring they don't offend the elders or jeopardize their diaspora remittances.
Kinship.
Then they are navigating the red reality of presidential authority, terrified of arbitrary detention, or running afoul of a military commander.
Here.
Exactly. They are simultaneously internalizing the blue rhetoric of national duty, feeling genuine guilt and reverence toward the martyrs of the Independence War.
Guilt and duty.
And finally, they might have a child participating in the orange state-controlled education or mining sector, hoping for achievement, but knowing their labor will be conscripted.
All of those conflicting operating systems are firing at the exact same time. It is a 5-layer psychological burden, heavily bound together by the red-blue framework.
Meanwhile, the higher levels that would actually offer some relief, true civil society, pluralism, systemic governance, and holistic trust, they remain nothing more than chalk outlines.
They are phantoms of what the society could be, but they are firmly blocked from solidifying into reality by the state's structural ceiling.
That sounds like an incredibly tense, almost unbearable way to live day in and day out.
It is a society under immense, constant strain.
And that systemic tension is perfectly captured in the next visual. Slide 15 shows an illustration of a heavy, rusted iron chain. But the links aren't just lying in a straight line. They're linked together to form a tight, unyielding pentagram, a 5-pointed star.
The geometry of tension.
Exactly. It looks incredibly rigid, as if pulling on one side only makes the whole shape tighter.
That iron pentagram represents the 5 reinforcing contradictions that lock Eritrea in place. The presentation maps these tension pairs across the levels we've just discussed.
What are the 5 conflicts?
First, you have survival versus extraction. The state needs people to farm so the nation can survive. That's BEIGE. But it extracts their labor for endless national service, ensuring they can't farm effectively.
That's a brutal catch-22.
It is. Second, coercion versus market logic. The state wants the wealth of orange economic output, but its reliance on red coercion destroys the free market needed to generate that wealth.
Right. Third is closure versus systemic openness. And finally, mobilization versus rights.
Yes.
I want to highlight a really critical piece of text on this slide regarding those tensions, because this part blew my mind. It says, feedback loop absorbs all change. External pressure converts into siege narrative.
That is vital.
This is such a profound insight, because I'm looking at this pentagram and thinking about how international diplomacy usually works, right?
Right. Sanctions, condemnations.
Yeah, the international community sees human rights abuses, so they apply pressure. They issue UN reports, they impose economic sanctions, they publicly condemn the leadership. But according to the structural logic of this framework, that external pressure doesn't crack the system.
No, it doesn't crack it at all. It actually feeds the blue narrative.
Wait, explain how that works.
That is perhaps the most profound systemic insight in the entire presentation. In a closed red-blue system, external pressure is the greatest gift you can give the regime.
Because it proves them right.
It perfectly validates their ideological siege narrative. When the UN condemns Eritrea, or sanctions are applied, the state media immediately turns around and says to the citizens, look, we told you the entire world is against us. We told you our martyrs died because of these exact foreign powers. This is exactly why you must remain in national service. This is exactly why we cannot risk having elections right now.
Oh, wow. So it just tightens the chains of the pentagram?
Exactly. The more the international community pulls on the chain from the outside, the tighter the red-blue lock becomes on the inside.
The state literally weaponizes the pressure to justify the permanent emergency.
It creates a self-sealing feedback loop. The system absorbs any attempt at change, whether it's domestic dissent or international condemnation, and perfectly metabolizes it to reinforce the status quo.
Which begs the massive looming question. How does a feedback loop like this ever end? Like, what did the future actually look like for a state built this way?
It's hard to see a way out, but the framework offers some possibilities.
Slide 16 shows an illustration. It's a massive wall constructed entirely of heavily mortared, alternating red and blue stones. It stands completely immovable, like an ancient fortress, as harsh desert winds whip dust and sand against it.
The source material uses the spiral dynamics data to project 3 potential futures for Eritrea. Future 1 is exactly what you see in the illustration: consolidation.
Because nothing changes.
Right. The red-blue wall simply hardens further. The 5 conflicts persist, the state remains totally locked in its siege narrative, and the indefinite national service continues unabated.
Okay, that's bleak. What's the second path? The slide outlines one titled, Modernize Tools, Not Logic. What does that look like in practice?
It looks like the creation of highly controlled, ring-fenced economic zones.
Ah, like special economic zones.
Yes. The state might allow certain orange market activities to expand, perhaps negotiating new foreign partnerships in mining, infrastructure, or port development, but they keep those activities strictly within red-blue boundaries.
So they take the money, but don't give up control.
Precisely. It yields surplus financial returns for the state apparatus, giving them better technology and more revenue to fund the military, but it allows zero political liberalization for the people. The tools of the state get a modern upgrade, but the core logic of coercion and endless duty remains totally unchanged.
So they just become a more efficient authoritarian state.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so what are the third path? The one that actually breaks the loop.
Future 3 is a stepwise dismantling. The slide visualizes this path as a staircase, but it comes with a stark structural warning. Each level must ground before the next stabilizes.
Meaning you have to do things in order.
You cannot simply jump from a heavily militarized beige survival state straight into a green multi-party democracy overnight. If you shatter the red-blue lock too quickly without securing the foundational levels of food security and basic legal order, the entire state could collapse into catastrophic chaos.
Like a power vacuum.
Exactly.
So the slide actually lays out the necessary sequential steps for this dismantling. First, you must end indefinite national service to stop the extraction of labor.
You have to let people work for themselves.
Right. Second, you have to separate the blue ideology of the martyrs from the actual functional governance of the state.
Secularize the state, essentially.
Yeah. Third, you must open the orange markets and allow independent institutions to build wealth. And only then, once the foundation is stable, can you establish a green civil society and true human rights, leading eventually to yellow multi-stakeholder governance.
The mechanics of how to transition are clearly known and mapped out. But look at the text at the very bottom right of the slide. Obstacle is will, not knowledge.
The barrier isn't that the leadership doesn't know how to open the economy.
No, not at all.
The barrier is that the current red-blue command corps has absolutely zero incentive to dismantle the very system that guarantees their absolute, unquestioned power.
They'd be dismantling themselves.
So if we are watching this state from the outside, how do we know if any of this stepwise dismantling is actually beginning? Like, are we just guessing based on rumors?
We don't have to guess. The framework provides a way to measure it.
Slide 17 shows an illustration of a dry, cracked desert landscape, but it's looking toward a really hopeful sunrise. Across the dirt, there are two bright, glowing parallel tracks or beams of light emerging, and right next to them, a tiny, vibrant green sprout is pushing up through the harsh soil.
The presentation provides a highly specific, data-driven metric for observers to watch. It proposes a 2-year directional threshold, tracking 10 specific indicators across 3 distinct dates.
Gates.
The genius of this metric is that these must be anchored in verified data from groups like Human Rights Watch or the World Bank. No new monitoring apparatus is needed. Analysts just need to track what is already being measured.
So Gate 1 is labeled red-blue loosening. This looks at fundamental structural changes, right? Like a verifiable reduction, the actual duration of national service, the emergence of any localized independent media, compliance with outstanding UN resolutions, and any signs whatsoever of judicial independence from the executive branch.
And the slide sets a strict rule to filter out propaganda. If you see 2 Gate 1 indicators improving consistently for 2 consecutive years, that signals a genuine loosening.
It'd have to be 2 years to prove it's real.
Right. It indicates a real transition onset rather than just a temporary diplomatic pivot to appease international critics.
Okay, and if Gate 1 finally opens, Gate 2 is orange-green emergence. This tracks metrics like mining revenue transparency, an increase in private sector employment shares relative to state conscription, and the legal registration of civil society groups.
And finally, Gate 3 is systemic integration. This monitors the autonomy of universities and the formal legal integration of diaspora remittances into a secure banking sector.
It's a very clear, logical roadmap to watch for that tiny green sprout of structural change.
It is a logical roadmap, yes. But until those specific indicators trigger and hold for 2 years, we are forced to return to the profound, gravity-defying paradox we started this conversation with.
And that brings us to the final, and frankly the most striking visual of the entire presentation.
That's a powerful one.
Slide 18 shows an illustration. It's an astronomical binary star system. In the direct center of the image, there is a fierce, violently burning red star. And right next to it, locked in a tight orbit, is an incredibly dense, glowing blue star.
Red and blue.
Yeah, and their immense combined gravity is pulling in and trapping a vast, colorful accretion disk of planetary matter. And those colors perfectly match the rest of the spiral dynamics levels, the beige, the purple, the orange, the green.
This raises an important question, perhaps the ultimate question of this deep dive.
What's it?
How does a state facing such overwhelming internal contradictions, such poverty, and such massive brain drain not simply collapse under its own weight?
And the slide gives us the definitive answer. Red-blue gravitational lock.
The flawless fusion of red coercion, the military, the fear, the prisons, with blue ideology, the martyrs, the sacred duty, the guilt, creates a gravitational pull so structurally immense that it completely arrests the natural development and transition of the entire society.
It traps everything. It traps the orange enterprise of the billion-dollar mines, the green pluralism of the diaspora, and the yellow systemic thought of its intellectuals, pulling absolutely all of it into a frozen, inescapable orbit around the state's centralized power.
This beautiful but terrifying binary star metaphor perfectly explains the ultimate paradox we set out to understand.
It really does.
It shows exactly, step by step, how you can have a billion-dollar mining industry alongside a population where 500,000 people have fled as refugees. It explains how extreme beige poverty and an endless, indefinite blue conscription system can endure, side by side, locked in one single territory, unable to move forward, yet too structurally dense and heavy to fall apart.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and recap the incredible journey this presentation just took us on.
It's a lot to process.
It is. We started by looking at the harsh, beige baseline of sheer survival in a drought-prone land, and how that forces reliance on the purple kinship networks, right?
Yes.
And then we saw how those foundational levels were essentially hijacked by an ironclad red-blue lock, a brilliant but devastating system that fuses military fear with a sacred, guilt-driven duty to the nation's martyrs.
And we traced how that specific red-blue fusion acts as a structural ceiling, completely capturing the orange economic output from industries like mining.
Totally exiling the green pluralist voice of civil society to the diaspora.
Exactly, and making yellow systemic transparent governance structurally impossible.
It is a sobering, honestly masterclass application of spiral dynamics to a real-world geopolitical situation. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over.
Oh, this is the most important part.
We talked at length about how, in slide 15, external pressure from the international community often just feeds the regime's siege narrative. When the world condemns them, it only tightens that red-blue lock even further, validating the state's claim that the world is out to destroy them.
It creates the ultimate diplomatic trap for anyone trying to help.
Right, so here is the question to explore on your own. If direct aggressive pressure only arms the system's ideological immune response, how should the global diaspora, or international diplomats, engage with such a heavily fortified system?
It's a real puzzle.
Is there a way to introduce systemic change, or support that tiny green sprout of progress we saw, without triggering the very alarms that caused the binary star to pull its gravity even tighter?
It is a question that requires moving far beyond traditional diplomatic threats, and perhaps requires some truly innovative, yellow, systemic creativity from the rest of the world to solve.
A massive thank you for joining us on this intense deep dive into the source material. We hope it gave you a completely new lens through which to view complex global systems and the hidden architectures that hold them together. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the structures around you.
Thank you for listening. Keep connecting the dots.